We have a sphere that can copy everything and transform into what it has copied. Its creator released it into this land and observed it. Initially, it copied a stone and remained still there. Gradually, moss grew on the stone, so it copied the moss too. Snow then began to fall. A wounded wolf collapsed right next to the stone. It copied the wolf and gained its first consciousness. It began to stumble around, and it also copied the wound, causing it to experience the discomfort of pain for the first time. But it quickly recovered and continued walking. It kept walking without any purpose. After some time, it returned to the old owner of this wolf. The owner was very happy about its return. When entering the house, it saw everything new, and this warm feeling made it want to stay here forever. It was then fed by the owner and went to sleep. Food here was now very limited, so they couldn't be picky about anything delicious. After eating, the owner went to sleep. In the morning, he went out to chop wood from surrounding houses for warmth. The people who used to live here with him all left 5 years ago to search for a better and more complete place to live. Only he stayed here, lonely with the dog all this time. He had wanted to leave, but the dog always bit his legs to hold him back, so he had to stay. The adults had told him to stay and take care of the elderly, but they all left. The wind chimes in front of the house rang, making the boy think everyone had returned. But when he got home, the lonely scene remained unchanged. The wind chimes rang because a fish had taken the bait, a very big fish. At night, the boy butchered the fish, and because he wanted to save firewood, he chose to eat it raw instead of cooking it. He still remembered the faces of everyone who used to live here, and he really wanted to leave this place. The next day, he decisively packed his things and left to find a better place. After traveling some distance, both discovered a stone with an arrow pointing forward. This must be a message left by everyone. Both continued on their journey and set up camp at night to rest. In the morning, they continued and found another guiding stone. Many days passed, each day the same as the last, nothing changed, until one day the boy discovered a tree on the road. He used it for firewood and returned to the main route when he saw the stone. Suddenly, the boy fell into a cold lake. His leg was injured, so he had to set up camp again to bandage it and warm up his body. The boy decided not to return because food hadn't run out yet. The boy would continue on his journey, and as long as he had strength, he would keep going. Walking continuously for 2 days, the wound seemed to get worse, but the boy didn't give up because if people didn't return, they must have reached a really good place. He wouldn't return just to die rotting in that house. However, the boy discovered that the next stone he saw had an X mark on the arrow. Nearby were the ruins of a broken-down vehicle and graves similar to the ones he had made for his grandparents. The boy knew what had happened, but still tried to think most positively, but tears kept flowing. He wondered if he could reach a better place. The boy gave up and decided to return home. Both wandered for many days to return to that rotting house. The boy had been depressed for many days without bothering to light fires or find food. The leg wound was almost untreated, so it gradually got worse, and then what had to happen, happened. The boy sat on the chair and passed away. The wolf ran over and then copied the boy's form and became human. The boy had reached a better place in heaven. While it had gained human form and set out for the better place the boy had always wanted. From now on, it would surely meet many people and experience many more things. It then went south to find more information for its own evolution. Because it lacked human characteristics, along with the leg wound and almost no nutritional supplements, it quickly died, but each time it could be reborn again. With this creature, each death was a transformation. Until now, it had died 6 times. The first time it needed 5 days to be reborn, and by the 6th time, it only took half a day. Finally, it successfully reached the mountain that its previous owner had desperately wanted to reach. However, it was immediately attacked by a giant bear and died again. In a village, there was a little girl named March. She usually only played with Perona, an older girl who lived nearby. In the middle of playing, March was called home by her parents. Little March very much wanted to become an adult because there were now only 3 children left in the village, and 2 of them were in this very house. Her mother believed that she would only be considered an adult when she could sleep without wetting the bed. The next morning, Perona was still practicing archery as usual, but her skill was rather poor. March was still playing with stuffed animals. When Perona came to play, suddenly a bell rang. Perona knew what this meant, so she hurriedly took March down the mountain. But on the way, both were stopped by Hayes, the head of the village's guard council. It turned out that the bell earlier was an assembly order. March was brought back to the village, and the village elder, along with Hayes, gathered everyone and announced that they had been chosen by the god who brings prosperity and peace, and they would have to choose an unsullied girl to offer to the god. The village elder examined the village's 3 children and then chose little March. Everyone congratulated her for being chosen. Her parents smiled in front of others, but when they got home, they could only cry and apologize to her. Hayes came and revealed that the girl had been chosen as a sacrifice for the god. On the day of the ceremony, she would participate in a feast to say goodbye to her family and then be taken up the mountain as a sacrifice for the god to eat. A year later, they would return there to collect the remains for the family to bury. March stubbornly refused because she didn't want to die but wanted to become an adult. March didn't accept that only she had to die, but she had no choice. In the following days, March was constantly monitored by Hayes. If she ran away, her little sister would be chosen instead. On the day she was taken away, March had to bid farewell to her parents to leave. On the way up the mountain, Hayes said that when March crossed over to the other world, she would be free to become an adult as she wanted. Suddenly, an arrow flew at Hayes, and March took the opportunity to escape. Someone had rushed out to ram into Hayes and then fled. While running, March tripped and fell into a small pond nearby. Here, March accidentally met that immortal creature. When 2 soldiers came and witnessed its revival, they fled in terror, thinking it was a monster. It then turned away, and little March tried to ask questions but received no response, so she followed it. The person who had attacked Hayes was actually Perona. She had planned to use a skeleton to fake March's death, but Hayes decided to leave Perona there because she would certainly be punished. The 2 soldiers returned and told Hayes they should find another child because March was with a monster. Little March now noticed it couldn't speak. Both were hungry when they saw a tree full of fruit, so March climbed up to pick some. When she gave it to it, it suddenly threw the fruit on the ground and bent down to eat like a wolf as before. The little girl tried to teach it to say thank you, but it had no effect. Little March picked fruit, and it ate everything without leaving any for her, making her cry and climb the tree to pick and eat for herself. But when she saw it standing below looking up, she threw some down for it to eat. The feeling of taking care of it like a child made the girl feel extremely interesting. When it got tired of eating, it went behind a broken tree to sleep. That night, March dreamed about returning to the village after escaping, only to see the 2 remaining children being sacrificed, and then Perona and the villagers turning their backs on her. March woke up, worried about what happened in her dream, so she actively set out to return. But when it woke up and didn't see March, it followed the girl. She threw fruit to make it go in another direction, but it kept following March time after time, making her feel more and more like its mother. March later taught it how to hold food, but it still dropped it on the ground and ate like a dog. March saw it as a child, so she decided to name it Fushy, meaning immortal. The 2 soldiers were now guarding Perona while waiting for Hayes to return. However, Perona took advantage of their lack of focus to take out a knife hidden in her shoe to cut the ropes. Nearby, the bear that had killed Fushy before was approaching. Just as Perona cut through the ropes, the giant bear appeared with its enormous body. Arrows were nothing to it, and it simply killed 1 soldier with a bite. 1 soldier fled, and the bear then targeted Perona. She managed to cut the ropes in time and ran, but the bear drove her to a cliff edge and made her fall. Meanwhile, Hayes had found March walking with Fushy. Perona was fortunately saved by tree branches and fell into the pond where March had found Fushy. March was now saying goodbye to Fushy to return with Hayes, but witnessing March leaving, Fushy seemed to evolve. It gradually learned the most important aspect of being human emotions. Perona, while walking, saw bitten fruits scattered on the path and followed them. She accidentally met Fushy on the way and asked about March, but Fushy hadn't learned language yet so couldn't answer. She realized the direction Fushy was heading was toward the sacrificial altar. Meanwhile, March was made to eat something that appeared to be medicine by Hayes. When Hayes asked about Fushy, the soldiers called it the monster they had seen. Suddenly, the soldier from earlier arrived and informed them they were in danger from the bear. According to them, that bear was the god they wanted to sacrifice March to. The scared soldiers wanted to return, but Hayes wanted to continue and use a detour to reach the altar. March fell asleep after eating the medicine. She was then taken to the altar by Hayes. She and the soldiers went inside, cleaned up the bones of the previous sacrifice, placed March there, and tied her up tightly. She then heard loud noises approaching. It was that giant bear. It charged in, and at that moment, Perona also ran in. Hayes ignored this, thinking Perona would just be another prey for the bear. Perona tried to use her knife to cut the ropes, but her knife wasn't sharp enough. Then the bear approached and swatted her away with its paw. At this moment, Fushy entered. Hayes ignored this and closed the gate, but when she recognized Fushy, she and the soldiers climbed the walls to watch. They saw Fushy getting its head bitten by the bear, but it used its legs to push the bear's jaws open and escape. It then transformed back into a wolf and began attacking and biting the bear. No matter how the bear attacked, Fushy could always regenerate. It then bit the bear's neck, causing it pain and making it throw Fushy away. But Fushy kept coming back, dodging the bear's attacks and climbing up to bite its nose. Fushy bit down hard, causing the bear more pain as it tore Fushy apart. But being immortal, Fushy was unharmed and then bit off its nose. The bear struggled in vain and then died. That evening, March woke up not knowing what had happened. Hayes suddenly approached and used her spear to cut March's ropes, giving her and Perona a choice. Either die here or follow her back to her country and accept leaving their village behind. Perona chose to follow her, so she had people carry both the bear and Fushy along. Fushy then went to March, and Perona was still afraid of Fushy because of its dangerous nature, but it just bent down to eat the fruit March had dropped and said thank you, as March had taught it before. Years ago, Perona had been chosen as a sacrifice, but her older sister had tricked her into hiding in a tree and eating food her sister had prepared to survive. After a week, Perona returned to the village and was despised by the villagers because she had escaped being sacrificed and caused her sister to be sacrificed instead. She was ostracized and driven from the village. In her desperation, she ran away and saw what appeared to be her sister's severed foot, which terrified her. Back in the present, she didn't know what expression her sister had worn when facing death. They were still on their way back to Hayes's country. March was still busy feeding Fushy and teaching it to speak. Perona recognized the old woman who had chosen March before, but she showed them that she was a criminal. Actually, there were two tribes in this land. March's village belonged to the Ninnin tribe, while Hayes's was from the Janum tribe. The Janum people had always plotted to take over Ninnin's land, but outwardly they pretended to want to help the Ninnin people perform their rituals. They used a criminal like the old woman to deceive them and interfere with their sacrificial ceremony. Gradually, the Ninnin people would be spiritually invaded by the Janum people without realizing it. Perona hated the Ninnin people because they were willing to abandon their flesh and blood just to follow their so-called beliefs. Perona was determined to end this barbaric custom, but the old woman believed it was impossible because the Ninnin people were blindly devoted to their faith. Fushy then peed in the cart, forcing Hayes to let them stop for a bath. When March took Fushy down, he suddenly remembered his old master's image and transformed back into human form. March only then realized that the dog that had been following them was actually Fushy. Perona was also surprised that March knew this immortal creature. Perona wondered if Fushi could find meaning in his endless life. By evening, Hayes had successfully brought them to the Janome people's country, which was more advanced and modern than March's village. Hayes let them eat whatever they wanted and said she would pay. While enjoying themselves, March remembered her parents and became sad. Suddenly, they spotted a postal shop nearby. March went in wanting to send a letter to her parents, but when the owner learned her parents were from Ninan, he seemed hesitant. Hayes explained that the Ninan people were illiterate, so even if March wrote something, her parents wouldn't be able to read it. March then made handprints with ink on the paper, thinking her parents would understand this. However, no one knew the exact address of her parents, as there were over 40 villages in Ninan and they didn't know which one to send it to. Perona decided to keep the letter, and they would send it once they knew the address. They later went to dinner where Hayes had to teach them how to use chopsticks. While Fushi was eating candy skewers, he got poked in the mouth by a stick and bled, but soon after learned the correct way to eat. Suddenly, March and Perona fell unconscious clearly. Hayes had some scheme planned. She then took Fushi before her superiors and reported how she had defeated the bear god. To test Fushi's immortality, they brought in a prisoner to stab him. Fushi quickly recovered and created a spike that pierced the man's shoulder. Fushi now learned about pain and continued to be tortured and attacked. But when he tried to escape by transforming into a wolf, Hayes shot him with an arrow, making him collapse midway. She then threw Fushi in with March so the girl could calm him down. March pulled out the arrow for Fushi and looked for Perona. The older girl was on the upper floor and asked March to tie an arrow to a rope and send it up to her. She also asked March to send up some of Fushi's fur. Fushi suddenly ran to a corner of the cell and started digging to get outside. Both saw the bear being kept there, and it seemed it wasn't dead, but just exhausted from its injuries. March noticed its back was full of arrows and wanted to treat it. Suddenly Hayes returned, saying she couldn't find anyone willing to watch the bear. Upon finding March, she assigned the girl to watch the bear, reasoning that even if the bear ate her, it wouldn't matter. In the following days, March watched over the bear while caring for Fushi, while Perona upstairs was planning their escape. She would help the old woman escape, and together they would overpower the guards to get March out of there. She wanted to take some of the bear's skin and fur back to the village to prove to them that they no longer needed the sacrificial ritual. March managed to remove all the arrows from the bear's body and became friends with it. She believed the bear would eventually return to where it belonged without being attacked by humans anymore. However, a thank you was heard, and the bear officially passed away. Perona knew about this and decided she needed to act soon. That night, she climbed out to get evidence from the bear before its body was taken away the next day. While climbing, she slipped but had prepared by tying a rope beforehand. However, the rope broke, forcing her to quickly swing down to a nearby warehouse. She successfully dropped down into the warehouse but was caught by a soldier. When he tried to assault her, she immediately fought back and stole his belongings. Perona, now dressed in the soldier's uniform, went to find March to help her and Fushi escape. She unlocked the prison cell for March and didn't forget to free the old woman as well. She then led them to an escape route through a drain and told the old woman to lead March first. When March looked to see what Perona was planning to do, she saw her about to harm the bear, and the little girl asked Perona to stop. The girl wouldn't accept Perona doing this even though she believed the bear was dead. But Perona needed some of its hide to prove to the villagers so they would never sacrifice children again. Perona tried to explain to March that what she was doing would help the bear do good, but March stubbornly refused. Perona didn't want to waste more time there, so she gave in to March's wishes and left with her, thinking she'd have to explain things to the villagers verbally instead. On their way to escape by horse cart, March shared her plans for when she grew up, believing the villagers would be happy to see her again. The road became bumpier, so the old woman wanted to switch drivers. The cart started catching fire in one corner, forcing Perona to put it out. Suddenly, they were attacked, and Perona had equipment ready to block the arrows. She shot back with her bow, but to no avail, and Hayes offered to let them live if they handed over Fushy. Of course, March refused, so soldiers jumped onto the cart. Perona had to fight and kicked one off the cart, while March, wanting to help, jumped out to block an arrow meant for Perona. At that moment, emotions surged within Fushy, who jumped out and transformed into a bear, striking Hayes. Fushy then rampaged through the town. Perona realized March was severely wounded and tried to bandage the wound to stop the bleeding, but such an injury was too much for a child. March whispered her final words before passing away. Perona was devastated because since coming to the village, she had always lived alone, and March was the only child and person who would interact with her. The little girl always considered herself and Perona as parents to the dolls, but now March had to leave Perona to be their mother instead. The old woman could only continue driving, but Perona hugged March and jumped off the cart. She went to Fushy, who transformed back to human form to see. Perona approached Hayes with a weapon, intending to deal with her. March began to see visions of herself returning home with her parents and growing up, but she couldn't see Fushy anywhere. Then she realized she was witnessing the devastated town caused by Fushy, with Perona pointing a spear at Hayes. She tried calling out to Perona, but the barrier between life and death prevented Perona from hearing. Perona felt she couldn't live without March and planned to follow her. March begged Perona to stop and called for Fushy's help. Somehow Fushy heard and stopped Perona, then transformed into a bear to take her away. Perona was later brought back to the village by Fushy. Everyone recognized Fushy as the bear god they worshipped and became fearful. Suddenly Perona appeared, and March's parents wondered where she had been for half a year. She gave them March's letter along with their daughter's remains. March's father blamed himself for not protecting his daughter. When they heard Jananda's people were coming, Perona told Fushy to flee, knowing they were pursuing him. Fushy seemed to understand and sadly transformed into a wolf before leaving. Perona then discovered Hayes tracking Fushy and shot her with the same arrow that killed March. She truly wanted to kill her, but only managed to hit her arm. After witnessing this second death right before his eyes, Fushy changed significantly. He continued on to gather new stimuli, spending most time in wolf form to decide his direction by scent. He disliked transforming into a bear, as that form only brought pain. He occasionally transformed into human form, but didn't do much with it. When hungry, it transformed into March's form to climb trees and pick fruit. Then it detected a familiar scent, that of the old woman. It approached her, and she thought they had abandoned her mid-journey, causing her to get lost and have to beg for survival. She believed March was still alive until she saw Fushy approach, look at March's bloodstain, and transform back into the teenage boy form. Then she realized this was Fushy. Fushy continued wandering aimlessly, so she followed. Having gone hungry for several days, she became exhausted trying to keep up with Fushy. Seeing his thigh, she became hungry and tried to bite it, but he transformed into a wolf and growled. He then transformed into March, climbed a tree, and ate fruit by himself. She wanted to eat too, so he threw some down to her and came down demanding thanks. She thanked him to make him happy, and when she saw a map, she took out paper to copy it. Fushy seemed interested in writing, so she taught him how to write and wanted him to follow her so she could teach him about writing and living like a human. The old woman, whose name was Piorin, taught Fushy how to write the names of people he had met. She taught him how to name things around them, drink water like a human, eat like a human, and say delicious after eating instead of just thank you. The two traveled and learned together until they reached a coastal fishing village. Fushy now knew how to ask questions and remembered the words he had learned. He spoke more and more clearly, telling Piorin about his wish to grow up as March had wanted. Before meeting her, he had always traveled alone until someone fed him. Though he didn't know their name, he remembered them clearly and now used their form to live. That night, Piorin realized they had reached her homeland, a country often at war with Jananda. She planned to stay the night before visiting an acquaintance. While sleeping, Fushi was suddenly attacked by some supernatural creature that pierced his body. He transformed back into a wolf and saw the creature transforming into the teenage boy form. Suddenly, time stopped, and a spiritual entity informed Fushi that this form was his and had been stolen by the creature. Simply put, this was Fushi's enemy, and he needed to fight to reclaim that form. Fushi attacked, and the entity explained that this creature had a core and existed to steal Fushi's transformation forms. The wolf form was then pierced and stolen, forcing Fushi to switch to bear form to fight. Though the bear was large, it managed to grab the wolf and tried to crush it, but it stabbed Fushi's hand and attempted to take the bear form too. Fushi acted as quickly as possible and exposed the creature's core, but it had already taken the bear form, forcing Fushi to use March's form to escape. He climbed a tree and jumped at the creature's core location, trying to pull it out. The creature used tree branches to pull Fushi away, but this actually helped pull its core out, causing it to stop functioning and dry up. All forms were returned to Fushi. When he wondered what this entity was, the being revealed himself as Fushi's creator, who wished to change the world. However, creatures like the one they just fought were sent to stop Fushi. They would meet again, but for now, it was best for Fushi to enjoy himself. Piorin didn't know what had just happened, and Fushi didn't tell her. The next morning, Fushi and Piorin arrived at her lover's house and met a strange boy wearing a transparent lizard-like mask. Going back in time, there were two brothers named Shin and Gugu who always dreamed of having lots of money to live in a huge mansion. On regular mornings, Gugu would go to the local market to sell vegetables given by his master. There, the boy was always attracted to a young lady of similar age whose name he didn't know. After the market closed, Gugu returned to his shelter and found Shin talking to three strangers whom his brother claimed were his friends. The young boy had no choice but to believe what his brother said. The boy later checked his money box and discovered it was missing money, suspecting his brother took it. But Gugu couldn't suspect his only relative, so he hid the money box in a nearby tree trunk and went off to eat bread alone with a stray dog he found. The next day, Gugu encountered the same dog he had fed yesterday, and at the same time, he heard someone calling for the dog. Following the voice, he met the young lady he had a secret crush on. The boy returned the dog to its owner and was rewarded with a gold ring by the girl if sold. The money could last a lifetime. That's a bit of an exaggeration. Gugu returned happily with a ring in hand, but then suddenly realized the money box was completely empty with only a letter inside, and Shin had disappeared without a trace. Wandering sadly on the hill, Gugu looked at the lumber truck and wondered if he should throw himself at it to end everything. Suddenly, a log fell from the truck and nearly hit Gugu, making him abandon that foolish thought. The driver came down to apologize and asked the boy to watch the log while he found help. However, the log began sliding down the hill, and at the bottom was the young lady picking flowers. Gugu jumped to push her away to save her while he fell down the hill with the log. More tragically, the large log crushed the boy's face. Gugu then learned that the girl he liked was named Rin when he heard her father calling for help from above, while Gugu lay under the log with no one paying attention to him. The boy lay there until evening when an old liquor seller nearby found him and took him for treatment. When he regained consciousness, Gugu saw that his face had been completely destroyed, so he wore this mask to hide his ugly face. Back to the present, when Fushi and Mrs. Oren entered the house, they met Gugu. Mrs. Oren then led everyone outside to demonstrate Fushi's abilities to the old liquor seller. Gugu was extremely fascinated by Fushi's abilities, so he offered friendship and took Fushi on a tour. During dinner, Mrs. Oren and the old liquor seller discussed ways to use Fushi to make money, but Gugu stood up to protect Fushi because the boy had become close and saw Fushi as a family member. The next afternoon, Rin, the girl Gugu had saved that day, came by, but she came to shop. She was interested and wanted to know his name, but Gugu thought his crush was noticing him when actually she was interested in Fushi. That night, Gugu lay crying, and in his sorrow, the old man appeared and advised the boy to get used to life gradually, saying that to succeed, one must accept both bitter and sweet experiences. Just those words suddenly gave the boy a new ray of hope, and he immediately ran out to train hard. Both the elderly couple and Fushi could only smile at Gugu's innocence. Early the next morning, Rin came to the liquor store to ask the old man if she could work there. Seeing that she was pretty and willing to work for free, the old man agreed immediately. Everyone surely knew the reason she agreed to work there was because of a certain handsome immortal youth. During dinner time, the old man warned Fushi not to use his powers in front of Rin lest the locals attract unwanted attention. While cleaning and washing dishes, Gugu and Fushi discovered that if any object hurt Fushi, he could replicate those tools, of course, only objects with shape, not formless things like fire. However, Gugu cut Fushi's hand, making him cry in pain. Gugu told Fushi that if something hurts and he doesn't like it, he should speak up to let others know. The next morning, Rin came to the liquor store to find Fushi and conveniently asked Gugu how to heal the scar on her hand. Gugu ran to find the old man to ask how to treat his crush. So the old man took out the medicinal liquor from inside Gugu's body, revealing that during the surgery to save Gugu's life, he had implanted liquor inside Gugu's internal organs, making the boy both angry and horrified at the old man's bizarre hobby, causing him to run away from this place on all fours. He left, but no one in the house bothered to look for him. Even Fushi, who was quite close to Gugu, didn't want to search for him, probably still upset about Gugu hurting him. But now without Gugu, no one would do the housework, so Fushi decided to take over Gugu's household duties. However, Fushi's cooking style, which wasn't suited for human consumption, made everyone apprehensive. Meanwhile, Gugu diligently looked for new work, ignoring the rumors from local residents calling him a monster. Gugu returned to his former employer who agreed to hire him back and even offered him a place to stay. However, the employer's son showed hatred towards Gugu's monster-like face, so Gugu was considerate enough to decline living with them. Having already gained a reputation, Gugu removed his mask to show them his deformed face and accepted being labeled a monster. Meanwhile, things weren't going smoothly for Fushi. Feeling that being a wolf wasn't enough, Fushi decided to become a bear for fun. As a bear, Fushi went from the house to the fields, somehow managing to destroy all the old man's potatoes while digging. Fushi even became a bear in the kitchen. Realizing their incompetence, Fushi asked Mrs. Oren for guidance with housework. The old lady told Fushi to find Gugu and ask him to teach instead. Rin later brought in tea and asked why the old lady wouldn't help, to which she replied that they shouldn't spoil Fushi too much, as this would help them become more human. Gugu's situation was truly pitiful at this time. After removing his mask, the surrounding villagers constantly mocked him. Worse still, his employer's son came to his hut to insult him, telling the boy to stay away from his father as he was bringing shame to him. Not wanting to cause trouble for those who had been kind to him, Gugu left. He tried to find work, but everyone who saw his face reacted with fear and cruel words. Down to his last coins, Gugu remembered the ring Rin had given him and went to a pawn shop, but at the last moment changed his mind about selling it. While wandering the streets, Gugu met his brother Shin, who had abandoned him in the past. The kind-hearted boy gave Shin the ring and left, hoping his brother could start anew. While sleeping in a hut to shelter from rain, Gugu was suddenly captured by two strangers who thought they could sell him. At that moment, Fushi appeared to rescue him in bear form, scaring the captors away. Thus, Fushi and Gugu reconciled. Afterward, they used the bear form to scare people around the village. When Fushi asked when he would return to the wine seller's home, the boy didn't want to go back, still upset about what the old man had done. Due to not eating for many days, Gugu fainted and was taken back to the hut by Fushi. Fushi managed to create plenty of food for the boy by stimulating their subconscious. The stronger the stimulation, the deeper the memory, making it easier to replicate food. After eating their fill, the two talked. Gugu shared that he once lived in a luxurious house full of food with his parents and 2 younger sisters, living happily with his family. But one day, due to work, that family moved away and left Gugu and Shin behind. It turned out the people Gugu thought were his family were just his employers, and only Shin had been there to raise him from birth. But eventually even Shin left him. But now Gugu had Fushi, whom the boy considered more than family. He even wished that when he died, Fushi would take this form to always remember him. That evening, Rin found both of them using her puppy. She informed them that the old man had reflected on his actions and really wanted Gugu to return. But having lost his mask, Gugu feared being ridiculed by villagers and refused to leave. However, Fushi said this was a small matter and ran off to find one for Gugu, leaving him embarrassedly alone with his crush. Seeing Gugu too shy to say anything, Rin opened up about herself. She actually disliked her family, always under her parents' strict supervision without any freedom, which was why she often ran away from home. After that, Rin gave Gugu the mask that she often used when sneaking out and told him that no matter what Gugu was, she would always be willing to open her heart to understand him. Hearing his crush say this, Gugu couldn't hide in the tent forever. Fushi, after searching for a long time, finally found Gugu's mask in the pond, and at the same time, he met the person who created him. He warned Fushi not to think that peace would last forever, as enemies were always waiting to attack him. On the other side, after Gugu freed Rin from the soldier her family hired to bring her back, they both reunited with Fushi. Gugu switched back to his own mask and gave the other one to Rin because he didn't want others to notice her. After walking for a while, the group was spotted by Rin's close servant. Having taken care of Rin since childhood, how could the servant not recognize her even with the mask on? Gugu didn't want to let her take Rin back, so he grabbed her hand and ran into the forest. Fushi transformed into March to distract the servant so both could escape. As the creator had warned, after the previous battle, it seemed Fushi hadn't learned any lessons. This time, the mysterious enemy returned and captured Fushi. Hearing the screams for help from Rin's servant, both children went back to check and saw that the enemy had stolen Fushi's March form. When facing the enemy, Gugu was attacked, but Fushi jumped in to block the attack. The monster used ropes to tie them both up, forcing Fushi to transform into a bear to break free. But the monster then threw Gugu away and stabbed Fushi, continuing to steal his transformation abilities. Gugu managed to get up, dizzy and vomiting the alcohol in his body, and the nearby torch ignited the alcohol on the ground. Gugu came up with the idea to breathe fire to burn the enemy, but unfortunately, he had thrown up all the alcohol in his body. The boy told Fushi to hold on while he rushed back to the old man's house to get more alcohol and return to help Fushi. When he arrived, Gugu saw Rin's family forcing her to leave the old man's house. Gugu, affected by alcohol, staggered drunkenly, ignoring everything happening around him. He approached and asked the old man to pump him full of alcohol so he could go save Fushi. Next, the drunk boy defended his crush in front of her parents and boldly declared that he was the man who loved Rin the most, then left to return to the fight. The hostile creature had transformed into a bear by then, but with his body full of alcohol, Gugu quickly spewed a massive flame that incinerated the enemy. Following the light emanating from the defeated enemy, Gugu saw Fushi's true form. Fushi had reverted to his stone form after losing all his transformations, but thanks to Gugu's help, he managed to recover all the forms he had lost. They returned at dawn, and since Rin's family was there, Gugu showed off his cooking skills by preparing a grand feast for everyone. Outside, the creator talked with Fushi, revealing that the creatures that attacked him were knockers, whose existence was meant to destroy this world. He requested that Fushi leave to strengthen himself because when the knockers lose, they always learn from their defeats, and when they return, Fushi would lose all his forms and memories, becoming nothing but a stone like before. Fushi stubbornly disobeyed the creator because he still had Gugu, believing that Gugu would fight alongside him. But it seemed the creator already knew Fushi's fate, so he didn't say much more before leaving. Many years passed, and Gugu had grown into a strong young man through diligent training. Thanks to learning from Gugu, Fushi now could cook very well. He had grown taller and spoke more fluently than before. Rin's birthday was coming up, and she invited Fushi and Gugu to attend. Fushi hadn't transformed once in the past 4 years. He had grown naturally, and the reason he didn't transform was firstly because, fortunately, the knockers hadn't attacked, and secondly, because Fushi wanted to try living without transforming like Gugu's group. This had led to him having fewer stimuli and experiences, and the experience he gained during this time was mostly just about normal life. While studying sewing, Rin asked about Gugu's favorite food. Fushi revealed it was crayfish, so Rin planned to prepare it for the party. She didn't know what else Gugu liked, but Fushi thought that Gugu would like anything if it came from Rin. Rin disclosed that her parents would soon force her to marry someone she had never met. She explained to Fushi what marriage meant and believed that one should only marry someone they like. Fushi noticed that the person she seemed to like was Gugu, as he appeared to like her too. Fushi then gave the old man a sweat towel he had made. Meanwhile, outside, Gugu accidentally encountered his brother Shin. Shin didn't understand why Gugu was wearing a mask, but mentioned he had been searching for him all this time and was glad to see his brother was okay. Gugu angrily asked why Shin was here. Lady Orin, hearing about Gugu's brother's arrival, came out to see. Shin wanted to apologize to Gugu for being bewitched in the past, but Gugu believed that with Shin's true nature he had abandoned him and left. Shin couldn't deny this, but still wanted to return the ring to Gugu, who rejected it by knocking it away. Shin had been searching for Gugu for 4 years. He had worked and earned a stable income, owning a farm tool shop. Although his dream of building a mansion was still distant, he wanted to achieve it with Gugu. However, Gugu refused, explaining that since being abandoned, he had suffered but had overcome it. The people around him now were his most precious treasures, an eccentric but genius old man who was his benefactor, the wise and interesting Lady Orin, the gentle Rin, and Fushi, whom he cherished like a brother. He told Shin not to try taking him away from this family again. Shin had to accept his brother's wishes and let Gugu continue working. He told Gugu to ask for his help whenever needed, as that was the only thing he could do for his brother. Shin then met everyone and tried to return the ring. The old man took it, and when Rin saw it, she remembered it was the ring her father had made for her. She had given it to the person who helped find her lost dog, who coincidentally turned out to be Gugu, whom she liked. She later took the ring to find Gugu and found him sleeping. She tried to put the ring on his finger, but his hand was too big, startling him awake. Rin wanted Gugu to confess to her, as he had previously declared he liked her most in front of her parents. Gugu didn't remember this as he was drunk at the time, which made her upset and leave, demanding he attend her birthday party. The old man explained this was the effect of alcohol bringing out true feelings, and thought Gugu was in trouble but was happy for him. The old man then gave Gugu a new mask, specially made to help him deal with monsters. This mask had a built-in ignition system allowing him to breathe fire without needing a torch. Gugu then got dressed to attend Rin's birthday party. As the old man watched Gugu and Fushi leave, he became emotional. Although Gugu would only be gone for a day, what moved him was seeing how Gugu had matured. He regretted that he wouldn't be able to witness all of Gugu's growth before dying. Gugu wanted to buy a gift for Rin and remembered the type of flower she had admired before, so he bought one. When they arrived at Rin's house, they went in, and Gugu casually helped himself to food, causing people to gossip, though he didn't care much about it. Rin came out to greet them both, and Gugu showed off his new mask. When Gugu tried to bring up the previous incident, Rin shyly avoided the topic. She accepted the vegetables from Fushi, and Gugu presented his flower, but it accidentally reminded Rin of a past accident. Gugu felt awkward for not knowing this, but Rin accepted it and went inside. Her mother wanted to throw it away, but Rin wanted to keep it because it was from Gugu. Meanwhile, outside, a young man was criticizing Gugu for rudely wearing a mask at the event, but Gugu refused to remove it, leading to a minor scuffle that Rin had to come out to break up. After that, Rin's father introduced her to her arranged fiancé, and they were allowed to go out and talk. Gugu saw Rin laughing and having fun with that person, felt a bit heartbroken, and was about to leave. Fushi wanted Gugu not to give up so quickly, but Gugu had long accepted being at a disadvantage and just left. Rin later ran to Gugu and apologized for what happened earlier. She then asked about why Gugu wore a mask, and he told the truth that his face was crushed by a falling wooden beam because he had to save someone who was in the path of that beam. However, he still felt that he had left a scar on that person's arm, making them feel ashamed, but she thought Gugu's wounds were more severe. She confessed that she knew Gugu was the one who saved her before, but now she was certain about it. Suddenly, the ground where Gugu stood shattered, causing him to fall. The creator came to meet Fushi and let him know that the knockers had returned and had taken root throughout this mansion. Fushi was about to go look for Gugu when he saw the house was about to collapse, so he transformed into a bear to hold up the house for everyone to escape. Gugu had grabbed onto a tongue growing from the rocks and was pulled up by someone above. He went inside to find Fushi and saw that Fushi was still holding up the ceiling because Rin's parents hadn't gotten out yet. He had to take both of them out and went back to find Fushi. Rin didn't want Gugu to go into danger, but he considered brotherhood more important than girls. When Gugu went inside, he saw Fushi had returned to his form from 4 years ago. A stone bear monster appeared to attack. Gugu breathed fire, but this one was made of stone, so it wasn't affected by fire. The bear struck once, causing the ground to split in half and making both of them fall towards a pile of stakes below. Fushi transformed his limbs into arrows to stick into the stone face and climb up. But those tentacles were pulling the ground back together, so Fushi transformed into March to climb up and then pulled Gugu up too. Gugu knew this stone layer was covering the flesh inside like those tentacles, so they climbed up together to find a weak point. Gugu found a hole and asked for arrows from Fushi to make the hole bigger. When Gugu saw the inside exposed, he immediately breathed fire into it, causing it to break into pieces, but the core still wasn't destroyed. It stuck into the wall and transferred its core into the wall. Fushi took out his knife to attack, but wasn't fast enough. Fushi and Gugu had hope for victory, when suddenly Fushi was strangled to death and March's form was stolen. Just as Gugu was about to be hit, Rin rushed in to save him. As both tried to run, the bear attacked and caused the entire mansion to completely collapse. Fushi had managed to get up at this point, but he suddenly felt pain that wasn't coming from himself. Fushi knew something bad was happening. Gugu and Rin were now under the ruins. Gugu knew he couldn't hold on much longer. They promised each other they would go pick flowers together when they escaped from here. Rin then removed Gugu's mask and saw blood dripping down. She suddenly kissed Gugu, and at this moment Fushi realized he had gained a new transformation form, which was Gugu. He couldn't accept that another person close to him was gone. He denied that Gugu was dead, but still used Gugu's form to fight. He continuously breathed fire until the monster knocked him into the sea. It chased after him, but the sudden temperature change caused it to shatter and the core escaped. The creator told him it had gone west and he could still catch up if he pursued now, but he chose to stay and take care of things here first before chasing after it. Afterwards, he saw that they managed to save Rin, but Gugu had truly passed away. Shin came to take his brother's body home, and Gugu now saw the images he most wanted to see of all the people important to him. But when he saw the reality that he had died, Gugu could only hug everyone one last time. In the days that followed, Fushi decided to leave to avoid drawing more enemies. Shin would take over Gugu's duties here, while Rin, who had just woken up, ran to look for Gugu. She didn't know what had happened, so she ran to the wine seller's house. At this time, Gugu had shared his final words with Fushi. Suddenly, Rin came looking for him, forcing him to transform into Gugu to deceive her. He told her that Fushi was the one who died and took her to see the grave. The elderly couple understood and played along to deceive Rin. She wanted to go pick flowers with Gugu, but he said he was busy now and would meet her later, telling her to keep the ring. In the days that followed, Rin kept waiting for Fushi in that flower field and told her father that she wouldn't marry anymore because she had someone she loved, and surely that person was now traveling with Fushi. Yes, she knew everything but deceived herself to avoid suffering. Fushi had been traveling for 4 days and now called out to the Creator. He asked what he should do now, but the Creator only wanted him to become stronger to reclaim what was stolen, as he had lost all images of March. He needed Fushi because he was the only special existence in this world, and the Knockers needed him too. But Fushi thought if he became something mindless, the Knockers wouldn't need him anymore. When he transformed into fruit, the Creator changed him back to human, saying that even as fruit, Knockers would still come to play with him. If he persisted, he would be turned back into a sphere and never be able to return to human form again. The Creator wouldn't mind, but was sure Fushi would. Fushi told him to fight if he wanted to, but the Creator said he would one day disappear and the mission to protect the world would fall to Fushi, so he had to train him by any means possible. When Fushi tried to defy him, the Creator turned him back into a wolf and told him if he didn't want to suffer anymore, he should become stronger. Later, Fushi smelled a familiar scent and ran to find Orin. She had decided to follow him since Shin and Rin were helping the wine seller. Rin had realized what happened to him, which was why she let Orin go so easily. Orin knew she wouldn't live much longer and wanted to support him with her remaining strength. When he refused, she wouldn't accept it. He didn't want to see anyone else die and begged her to go home, but she hit him with her staff, saying this was her life and he had no right to control what she wanted to do. The two eventually traveled together but hadn't made up and wouldn't talk to each other. She kept offering him food, but he kept refusing. They later reached a village and Orin went in to eat, but Fushi worried about Knockers finding them, so he didn't want to stay long. He later asked the Creator about the Knockers' location and learned they were still underground and hadn't surfaced. In core form, the Creator couldn't sense them, but when they grew large, he could sense them clearly. When Orin wondered who he was talking to, he told her about the Creator. He knew only he could protect her now, and it seemed the Creator intentionally let her follow him to give him a reason to become stronger. The next morning, Orin wanted fruit and told Fushi to climb up and pick some. When he couldn't climb, she told him to transform into March, but he had lost March's form and only had fleeting images left, unable to transform into her anymore. The Creator explained that once lost, he could only transform into that form again if he reclaimed it. Hearing about his condition, Orin worried he would lose when in Gugu's form and lose those memories too, which would be like dying again, and everyone's memories of Fushi would disappear as if they had died too. Determined not to let that happen, the next day he studied his abilities more carefully. He could transform into anything he touched, but conscious beings were different. He could only transform into them after they died. With creatures like crabs, when Orin cooked them, he would feel a tingling pain like the crab, and while he could transform into a crab, what he transformed into couldn't have life. Orin asked how he won before, and after he explained, she told him it was due to sudden temperature changes and described it to him. She then directed him to a forest full of animals that humans usually avoided due to its dangers, where he could acquire new, more useful powers. The next day, both of them boarded a ship to reach that forest, but as soon as they got on, a girl told them to separate into 2 sides for men and women. Neither of them suspected anything and followed along, only for Fushi to be led and locked in a cage. Inside were people who appeared to be slaves with marks stamped on their hands. After Fushi was stamped, it hurt quite a bit, but he recovered. He worried that Mrs. Orin was also caught. He and the others were then taken to an island, and when the inspector saw he had no mark, they thought he was brought here by mistake. The girl from earlier who took Mrs. Orin away came to pull Fushi out. When he asked about Mrs. Orin's whereabouts, she didn't know. He then decided to leave and lose her tail. He later transformed into a wolf and followed the scent to find Mrs. Oren. He could smell her scent on the other side of the wall, so he tried to find a way to climb over. But digging through the ground didn't work, and climbing required planting arrows one by one. However, while climbing, he was blown down by the wind and cracked his head. The girl from earlier and her group found him and learned about his regenerative abilities, so they promised to keep it a secret. As for his search for Oren, she apologized for mistaking them both as criminals. This place was a prison island used to detain dangerous prisoners. When he wanted to borrow a bow to shoot that owl to fly in, she stopped him because it was her companion. Fushy wanted to know if there was any way to get past the wall, but unfortunately there wasn't. However, she had a way for him to gain power in this place. He had to win this tournament. The winner would get all privileges on the island. He didn't know what he had to do here. Then the announcer declared the rules. Whoever survives on the field would be the winner. Fushy thought it was easy since he couldn't die. The massacre then began, and he saw the reality of this fight was meaningless killing, everyone frantically slaughtering each other to become the last one standing. Fushy couldn't help but feel nauseated. In the end, this red-haired guy was the last one remaining, but since Fushy was still on the field, he threw an axe at his head. Fushy saw many people watching him and didn't know what to do, because the old liquor seller had told him not to reveal his powers to others, but he still needed to win to achieve his goal. So he stood there frozen, and the other guy came over and used all the weapons he could find to pierce through him. Seeing that he wouldn't fall, the guy knew he wasn't easy to deal with, so he wisely pretended to fall to let him win. Afterward, he met that girl again. She introduced herself as Tanari and led him to meet everyone, then announced that the first 100 people who wanted to talk to him had to pay. When a young man wouldn't let them abuse their power, he was immediately shot with a sleep dart. Tanari was helping him build a reputation to become the island leader, as previous leaders all died within 2 weeks, which had caused the island to be in chaos for so long. But now with him being immortal, they could use him to rule and change this place. However, he didn't care. He just wanted to save Oren and leave. When he left afterward, Tanari and the kids who knew about him kept following him. This big guy was Yoroi. This red-haired girl was Mia. This curly-haired boy was Sandal. And that dart-shooting girl was Opa. They took him on a tour and let him know that there were 3 churches built here that deceived people outside that this place still had gods and deities' blessings. This place also had fields, and those who stole crops would be killed and hung up as a warning. Killing was permitted here as long as the person was guilty. They would be executed without mercy. Resources on the island were very scarce, so they had to endure to avoid losing their lives, even though they really wanted to leave. This place was originally managed by a country, but due to the uncontrollable numbers, it became self-governing. Fushy then looked at the marks on their hands and learned that this triangle represented family members of criminals, while criminals would have an additional circle in the middle. He didn't understand why prisoners could live freely outside, while Tanari had said earlier that Mrs. Oren was imprisoned. Why Mrs. Oren was imprisoned while other prisoners were not. Tanari told Fushy that Mrs. Oren was actually arrested in Janome for poisoning 10 people, and she was classified as a dangerous criminal. However, Fushy now feels he cannot cooperate with them because they are too sick to be able to laugh and play in a place like this. That night, he tried to shoot some bird to fly and find Mrs. Oren, but the creator asked him why he didn't continue the tournament. He said he didn't want to kill people. The creator told him that death comes to all humans, but humans have the right to choose when they die, like Gugu. Fushy indirectly caused Gugu's death, but Gugu chose to save Fushy and shortened his own life. Therefore, regarding those criminals in there, they had traded their lifespan to find an opportunity to change their lives, so he shouldn't feel guilty. But he ignored the creator's words and continued searching, and a girl came and licked his cheek. The next morning, he continued climbing the wall and kept falling down. Tanari wanted him to prepare for the next match. But he didn't want to participate because the upcoming match was one-on-one and he would have to kill someone to advance. He refused and continued his work. Later, Tonari heard that their distinguished guest from Janome had gone missing, and she went up to the arena and single-handedly dealt with many opponents. Surprisingly, she was Hayes, who had killed March that day. Fushi then discovered a mole had dug a passage right under these bricks, so he picked it up and killed it. He later regretted taking its life, but he immediately transformed into a mole to dig into the ground. However, he was grabbed by a bird and dropped near Tonari's group, so he had to enter the match. His opponent was a battle-crazed uncle. He used his immortal body to intimidate him, but the man wasn't scared and even bit a piece of him. He transformed into a wolf to attack and intimidate, but when that didn't work, he transformed into Gugu to breathe fire around. The man saw that he kept refusing to fight properly. Then he suddenly had some memories from the past and remembered Perona. He somehow transformed into Perona, and her body allowed him to move more flexibly and quickly, so he knocked the man down with a kick and won. But that form caught Hayes's attention. Although Fushi had no memory of March, he still remembered Perona, and he knew that being able to use this form meant Perona was dead. The creator was glad Perona died early so he could use this agile body, but he found the creator's words disgusting. The creator wanted him to discard emotions about human death, but unfortunately, pain was what drove his development, so he couldn't do anything more. Afterwards, he was followed by Tonari again. She kept bothering him. Everyone had slaughtered a cow to treat Fushi, but he refused and turned away. Tonari knew he didn't like killing, but the truth was that some people deserved to die, because the opponent he met today had killed over 50 people. Tonari didn't know what to do to support and gain his favor, but he refused because it was because of her that he and Mrs. Oren got involved in this cursed place. Even though Mrs. Oren had killed people before, Tonari told him about how her father had also killed people and showed empathy, but he still didn't care. So Tonari used a third method, wanting to help him find who had tricked her into leading Mrs. Oren and him onto this ship. Although he outwardly went along with her wishes, he didn't trust her, so at night he transformed back into a mole to dig into the wall. He successfully got in and followed the scent to find Mrs. Oren. He tried to climb up but fell down. She heard the sound and answered him. She knew that since he was using Perona's form, Perona must have sacrificed herself to protect someone. He wanted to help her escape from here, but she wanted him to go alone, because she was a criminal and this was where she belonged. He still insisted on saving her, so she asked him how he planned to rescue her, as the cell door was locked from the outside, and even if he could get in through this hole, how did he plan to get her out? Knowing he couldn't rescue her now, he left when he heard Tonari say she had useful information for him. He went back outside and asked about the information, but she said she would tell him after he wins tomorrow's match. He had to comply. Before entering the arena, Tonari told him to aim for the head and knock opponents out instead of killing them. He then entered the arena and transformed into Perona to fight. But his opponent was a martial artist who always protected his head. When the opponent grabbed his neck, he transformed into a mole to dig underground and attack from behind to kick him down. But the opponent got up again, and when the audience saw that he was going to spare someone again, they shot arrows down to finish the opponent themselves. He protected the man, but he still got hit by an arrow and was taken away. Although very dissatisfied with the people here, he had to accept it. Outside, he met the martial artist's brother who was still alive. The man had a younger brother, which was his reason for fighting. He revealed that their mother was brought here but died, so now his younger brother was his only motivation to strive. Fushi decided that after winning, he would help the two brothers leave this place. He then remembered the deal and demanded Tonari reveal the information. She evaded the question and deceived him again, so he began to openly despise her. The younger brother asked Fushi to make fire, so he transformed into Gugu to help. Suddenly, others came to complain about Fushi, saying that the fighters had bet their lives while he kept sparing people, which dishonored them. They claimed an immortal like him wouldn't understand the value of human life. When Tonari tried to intervene, she was hit, so her friends had to come break up the chaos. Suddenly, Fushi was attacked by a knocker and lost Gugu's form. He told everyone to run while he fought. He remembered using water and fire, but now that he had lost memories of Gugu, he lost the fire ability too. He had to run to an empty place and noticed a small hole in its body, so he transformed into a mole to crawl in and bite its vessels. But after just one bite, it threw him out and he lost that form too. He met Tonari's group again and they wanted to help him fight. He refused their help because he didn't want anyone to die, but everyone brought carts to tie up the knocker's hands. The monster caused the ground to shake and forced everyone to run. Tonari's group brought bows and explosive arrows to shoot at the monster, but it was too hard, so Fushi had to tell them to aim for the gaps. He transformed into Perona and copied a bow to shoot, but Perona's archery was still poor, so he had to practice repeatedly until he successfully shot an arrow into a gap. When arrows were running low, he had to copy more for everyone, and they successfully destroyed the knocker. Fushi regained everything, from March, the bear, to Gugu. Tonari taught him that sometimes he still needs help from others, and for big tasks, working with many people is best. The creator predicted this island would be a good place for Fushi to grow. That night, Tonari's group and Fushi had a celebration party. The group shared all their dreams. Tonari brought out food, but it was just beans and such, so Fushi created a lot of food. However, his food was all what Hayes had fed him before, so everyone fell asleep from the sleeping drugs after eating. He saw Tonari's diary and read one line but put it back and left. Tonari suddenly woke up and looked at Fushi to apologize for bringing him here. She then took the diary to write her own story. Previously, her family was the former owner of the wine seller's house. The family of 3 lived very happily, but when she was 7, Tonari discovered her mother's corpse at home. The church people judged her father as the culprit and exiled him from this island. Between 2 choices of living as an orphan or coming here, she chose to follow her father to the prison island because she believed he was innocent. After living on this lawless island for a while, her father decided to participate in the arena to win the right to leave and promised to meet his daughter at the port. In the stands, Tonari prayed for her father's victory. However, after seeing him become a bloodthirsty killer who smiled while killing people, Tonari was so shocked that she deceived herself into believing her father was dead, and that person wasn't her father. Finally, she went to the meeting point with her father and found a diary along with a birthday wish from him. She held on to the gift as one of the few remaining good memories of her father. Behind her was the murderous man with a late apology before he was poisoned and thrown into the sea. Fortunately for Tonari, she met friends in similar circumstances and lived with them until she was 12 years old. She took on the job of importing goods so she could go outside the island, but she was still under strict supervision, making escape impossible. At 13, Tonari realized that people outside the island neither welcomed nor sympathized with them. At 14, the year she met Fushi, a mysterious person who came to the island as a visitor had convinced Tonari that Fushi could change the island's fate, so she had to deceive him to bring him to that island. That person was actually right, because with his immortality ability, Fushi was gradually achieving what Tonari wished for. The next morning, Fushi transformed back into March to climb up and successfully meet Old Lady Orin in prison. He told her that tomorrow would be the final match, and if he won, he would lead her out of there. In the final match, Fushi was surprised that his opponent was Hayes, who was also the mysterious person who had manipulated Tonari. While fighting him, she revealed that Perona's form was her gift to him. She had personally killed March's entire village and finally Perona. Hearing these horrific things, Fushi declared for the first time in his life that he would kill her. However, he wasn't yet a match for Hayes. He fought without technique and was injected with a sedative, causing him to collapse. After winning, Hayes fabricated a story for the arena audience that she had discovered Fushi 5 years ago, that she had guided him and taught him how to be human. but because he didn't understand human spirit, he ran away. The audience began to be psychologically manipulated, so Hayes concluded her act by saying she would hand over leadership to Tonari. The people intended to disobey and wanted to kill Tonari and her teammates, forcing them to flee together. Meanwhile, Fushi was taken by Hayes to her residence. In bed, Hayes had intimate intentions with Fushi while he was unconscious, but Tonari's group interrupted, causing her to abandon her plans. When Tonari's group entered the room, they couldn't find Fushi. Hayes informed them she had him taken to a room deep underground where no one could contact him. The captain appeared and asked what they planned to do. Tonari, using her position as leader, demanded Fushi's return and said he would copy the captain's ship so they could leave. But obviously, Hayes and the captain didn't agree to let that happen. He then grabbed Appa and demanded Tonari's group apologize to the guest and leave. The situation became tense when none of Tonari's group would submit. But suddenly Fushi appeared behind Hayes with a sword to her neck. He hadn't been completely unconscious earlier, and the person the soldiers had taken away was just a corpse he had separated from himself, while he had transformed into a rat and escaped, then suddenly appeared as he did now. He demanded Hayes let Tonari's entire group go, and he would meet any conditions she wanted. Hayes agreed. The next day, the captain, representing Tonari and now the island's leader, announced they would transport a maximum of 700 prisoners off the island as the ship couldn't carry more. Tonari chose children under 7 years old and her teammates along with old Lady Orin, and she didn't forget to help the 2 martial artist brothers in place of Fushi. Fushi later came to the port to see off Tonari's group and old Lady Orin. She said she would wait for him at the port. Hayes arrived to interrupt their conversation, sedating everyone to ensure no one could cause trouble. Then she took Fushi away and dropped him down a very deep well. Tonari then woke up to find herself imprisoned on the captain's ship. She later met the elder chief and asked him to untie her. She then asked him to prepare a boat for her to return and save Fushi. The owl also followed her, and although Hades's soldiers discovered them midway, the captain didn't hesitate to help deal with them for Tonari. He had to teach these people not to act recklessly on his ship. So Tonari decided to continue her own story, and she wanted Fushi to be part of her story in the future. Tonari then went to Fushi's prison and lowered a rope for Fushi to transform into a mole and climb up. But surprisingly, Fushi was already standing behind her, as the pit couldn't pose any challenge to him. That night, a storm came, preventing them from leaving, so they had to spend the night in a nearby cave. The next morning, when Hades came to check on Fushi, she discovered he had escaped. Suddenly, a soldier ran in reporting that the town was in danger. Meanwhile, as Fushi and Tonari were preparing to leave, the creator appeared and informed him that the knockers were attacking the town. He decided to help the residents, but Tonari opposed, saying that all those worth saving had already been evacuated by her, so Fushi shouldn't risk himself for them. However, Fushi still left because the creator said that if they abandoned the town, the knockers would grow stronger, and future problems would be even bigger. On the other side, the knockers had possessed the corpses and risen from the pit of bodies. The residents were chaotically fighting back in vain. Fushi jumped in to fight, though he hesitated because they were all people, but the residents told him to fight since these were all previously dead people. During the battle, Tonari appeared to support him, and when she was in danger, her teammates also returned to help both of them. The group cooperated to fight the knockers, hoping to eliminate them all before dark. Suddenly, Upa tripped and was possessed by a knocker. Mia, not knowing this, went to help Upa and was stabbed. Fushi quickly ran to take Mia away and asked the creator where the safe direction was. He pointed to a direction that would only be safe for a few minutes. He brought the group to the temporary safe place, so they could try to save Mia. Yoroi asked Fushi if he had healing abilities, but that was beyond his capabilities. If he could do that, he wouldn't have suffered so many losses. The possessed Upa came back, and Tonari begged Fushi not to harm her. But Fushi knew she was beyond saving and was about to end it with his sword. However, he hesitated at the last moment and got caught by the knocker, who stole Perona's form. Yoroi then discovered a knocker had attached to his leg, so he told Tonari to go ahead while he would take care of Mia. Sandal had to pull her away to escape. As the knocker began to spread up Yoroi's arm, he didn't hesitate to draw his sword and cut off his own arm. He shouted for Fushi to transform into a mole, then threw him for Tonari's owl to catch and fly away from the area. Yoroi was then possessed by the knocker. Yoroi later reunited with his two friends in the other world. Back to Hades, she was observing the situation from above when suddenly a nearby knocker invaded her arm. She immediately pulled the horrible creature out of her arm and then shifted her target to Tonari and Sandal, who were running away below. However, Fushi in bear form attacked her before this crazy woman could do anything stupid. He ignored her when he saw Tonari and Sandal in danger and transformed into Gugu to breathe fire, sweeping away all remaining knockers. The creator appeared and revealed that only 3 knockers remained on the island. Tragically, these 3 were Tonari's friends. Too emotional witnessing this scene, Fushi didn't know what to do, but before receiving an answer, Hades rushed in to take down Sandal and brought Tonari to the edge of a large fire pit. She declared she would do the dirty work of killing the knocker-possessed friends in his place, but if he disagreed, she would kill Tonari. Hearing those terrible things, Tonari looked at Fushi and decided to drag Hades into the sea of fire. But Fushi reacted in time to save Tonari and sedate and restrain Hades. Once again facing controlled close friends, Tonari picked up a sword, deciding to free her 3 friends even though she had to struggle with her own emotions. However, Fushi didn't let her do that painful deed. He grabbed the sword from her and slowly walked towards those 3 people. After dealing with the knockers and cremating the dead with the locals, Tonari and Sandal decided to stay on the island to rehabilitate the land and care for the residents who had now become more united and humane than before. Fushi would continue his adventure, taking the unconscious Hades with him to prevent this crazy woman from hurting his friends again. He said goodbye to both friends and then sailed away. After some time, Hades woke up on the boat and saw Fushi waiting. He asked her what her ultimate goal was in pursuing him. She revealed that her only desire was to be by his side, explaining that she killed March and Perona because they were trying to take her Fushi away. She also confessed that she had loved Fushi since seeing him fight the bear. She knew he hadn't experienced love before, so she told him to spend one night with her to understand, but if he didn't like it, he could kill her and use her form to fight. However, he stood up and created another boat to travel separately. He directly stated that he hated her, and even if she died, he wouldn't care, so she should never come near him again. Fushi then left while Hades kept screaming until a knocker climbed onto her boat and took her. On his way to meet Pioran, Fushi asked the creator for directions, who informed him that Tonari's owl had already done that job. Fushi remembered that in his early days on the island, he just wanted to leave as soon as possible, but now he felt himself missing the island and everyone there, because without these experiences, Fushi wouldn't have grown up to be who he is now. When he reached the mainland, he found Pioran still waiting for him at a restaurant near the port. Remembering the past where loved ones died because of knockers, Fushi feared involving her and turned to leave, but worried she might not have money to pay. He returned to find that the owner there didn't charge her and even gave her lodging. The next morning, Fushi suddenly remembered he left without saying anything and worried she might keep waiting for him forever. So he returned and planned to write her a letter. He kept trying but couldn't write anything satisfactory. He chose to observe the old lady for a while. After a few days of observation, Fushi realized she could live well without him. The creator appeared and told him Pioran didn't have much time left to live, so he wanted Fushi to stay and take care of her. After some thought, Fushi decided to transform into Mia to give her a blanket as a farewell gift. However, she discovered him and kept him there. Pioran was very happy to see Fushi again. He tried to turn away, but in both their hearts, he deeply cared for Pioran, and after everything, they both decided to adventure together to the forest they had discussed before. After months there, although Piorin was nearly 90, she was still very energetic, fishing daily as routine. Fushi, after spending a long time with the old lady, now had more knowledge to keep Piorin safe. He established rules for himself. First, if knockers were nearby, he must take the old lady and run away. Second, he must limit himself from transforming into forms of creatures whose characteristics he didn't fully understand, because if he transformed into something like a leech, he wouldn't be able to protect the old lady when knockers attacked. Finally, sleep later and wake up earlier than the old lady. He also wrote down important things to remember what he needed to do. Piorin had told Fushi about her wish to be young again, telling him that she used to be very beautiful but had spent most of her life working. However, in these final years of her life, she felt truly happy living freely and having a grandchild like Fushi. Hearing these things made Fushi cherish her more, but heaven doesn't give everything to anyone. One day, the old lady began feeling unwell and became more irritable than before, her memory also gradually declining. But Fushi ignored all that and continued caring for her until the end. Until one day, Piorin suddenly became strangely normal. Because it was about to rain, she asked Fushi to go get dried fish while she lay down to experience her final moments. She called upon the Creator to take her away before Fushi returned, and if possible, to let this old body become something more useful to Fushi in the next life. He appeared in the final moments and agreed to Piorin's wish. In the other world, she saw her younger self, and true to her words, she was indeed beautiful. The Creator preserved her best qualities in an orb like Fushi's original form. Then she vanished, and Fushi once again witnessed a loved one's departure. The sky darkened and began pouring rain like his tears of grief. After cremating the grandmother who was also his close friend, Fushi found her final messages left on the note paper. Piorin wanted him to live for his dreams just as she had lived a life without regrets. Time passed, and the Creator had nothing new to tell about Fushi. Fushi had now reached middle age, laughing maniacally after killing a knocker, and this marked the end of part 1 of the film.